Hello learners, welcome to this online study session on the Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. In this session, we will be looking at how Morrison addresses and shapes the question of female experience and womanhood in her novel The Bluest Eye. I am Vaishali Sharma, Assistant Professor at Swami Shraddhanand College, University of Delhi, and I'll be taking you through this online study session. So without any further ado, let us begin. The publication of The Bluest Eye in 1970 heralded the arrival of a brilliant young novelist, but it took almost 5 years for many to sit up and take notice. Though Sarah Blackburn remarks that Toni Morrison's first novel was published at an auspicious time when a growing middle-class women's movement was just beginning to acknowledge the reality of its black and poor sisters, an overview of the critical discourse of the time shows that from the readership, the book received little, if any, understanding. The novel details the coming of age of a young protagonist, Pecola Breedlove, who is marginalized by her race, gender, and class. Pecola's eventual destruction haunts the narrator, Claudia McTeer, who feels retrospectively that there was something more she should have done, or should have been able to do to prevent Pecola's downfall. Morrison says that she wrote The Bluest Eye in part because it was a book that she would have wanted to read, but that did not exist in another form at the time when she was writing. The book is an important contribution to the outpouring of African American women's writing that emerged during the late 1960s and early 1970s and would become what is now known as the Afro-American literary renaissance. In addition to Toni Morrison, the Afro-American literary renaissance includes writers such as Alice Walker, Toni Cade Bambara, Gail Jones, Shirley Ann Williams, Gloria Neal, Nozotike Shangein, and Nikki Giovanni. It is noteworthy that after its first publication, the novel was out of print for quite a long time. A tragic story of child abuse with race, gender, and class mixed in it, The Bluest Eye is concerned with racial self-loathing, the loss of self-identity, and shame. Even though the setting of the story is in 1940s, the beginning of World War II for the United States, it is also persistent in concept, ideologically grounded in the 1960s when Black is Beautiful entered into the popular, if more militant discourse. Setting out to write a story that she herself wanted to read, Morrison worried that this slogan of racial pride would be unable to dispel the long-term psychic effects of prejudice rooted in racialism and sexism. The locale of this imaginative narrative is in Lorain, Ohio. The protagonist, Pecola Breedlove, a little black girl at the most vulnerable phase of her life. The title, The Bluest Eye, calls attention to itself immediately. The superlative degree of color as well as the singular form of the noun in the title is rather unusual, resulting in a pun. The singular noun may refer to the damaging white gaze, the omitted plural to be the object of desire, an epitome of beauty according to mainstream society, or alternatively to the saddest story of the demise of a child's identity, the I, integral to the blues sung by Claudia's mother. The multivocality of the I and the I serves also to reinforce the text's emphasis on the visual, evident in everything from the white man's gaze, as Chloe engages in his first sexual exploit, to the imposition of Hollywood icons in the cinema, and to Claudia's mutilation of the doll, punching out its startled plastic blue eyes in an attempt to find out what made it beautiful in the eyes of grown-ups. Pecola, desperately trying to escape the squalor of her life, finds that she can will her body to disappear limb by limb, piece by piece, but never manages to free herself of her eyes, her invisibility never quite complete. Yet in her encounter with Mr. Jakobsky, the storekeeper who will sell her 9 lovely orgasmic Mary Janes too, without ever touching her dirty little hand, his refusal to even look at her confirms for her the insignificance and invisibility of a little black girl for the white gaze. Like Lorf Allison's invisible man, her ugly black skin impedes any acknowledgement of the child within. Told in the present tense, which suggests timelessness as well as repetitiveness, the incident confirms for Pecola her lack of self-worth. The dandelions she had formerly thought to be quite beautiful are now simply the weeds everyone has said they are. Morrison's denunciation of the fetishism involved in the fixation on physical beauty is augmented by the time frame of her story. The moment the US is entering a war precisely to fight such racist ideology in the imposition of an Aryan ideal. World War II is also present in Morrison's penchant for giving her characters poignant names, her subtle delight in nominalism. This grand narrative of history is represented in her designation of the three whores as Maginot Line, China, and Poland. Yet, in Jennifer Gillan's insightful reading, The Bluest Eye is an indirect commentary on the artificial boundaries of citizenship, gender, race, and history. She points out the importance of Morrison's setting her story during 1940s because that is the year the United States was posing as the champion of democracy abroad while ignoring its own long-standing history of obsession with racial purity and preferences for blue-eyed and blonde-haired Aryans. The names China and Poland signify the European and Asian fronts. Maginot Line refers both literally and metaphorically to the tendency to focus on the wrong front, that is, projecting one's guilt onto another. On the home front, distraction from the socio-economic collapse and the calamity of war in Europe of the 1930s was provided by Hollywood, a rising industry dedicated to creating illusions of wealth and happiness, while simultaneously and insidiously reinforcing white notions of beauty. The oft-mentioned film stars in the text, Shirley Temple, Jean Harlow, Ginger Rogers, etc., serve to emphasize the omnipresence of the white gaze and its pernicious influence on the identity formation of the psychologically weakest characters in the book. Only Claudia, as a young girl, has the security of knowing who she is and the family and community support to reject an ideology that defines her as an inferior. Morrison's well-known predilections for using the narrative technique of inversion makes it clear that the text itself is specifying on a film adaptation of Fanny Hurst's novel Imitation of Life, published in 1933. In raw capitalist interpretation, Morrison provides her heroine Pecola with the role of an unimpeachable witness against the very system that caused Piola, a very white black girl, to become a household word. Pauline may have named her daughter after Piola, for Pecola's name is an inversion of Piola, the multata who hates her black mother in the movie Imitation of Life. In The Bluest Eye, the black mother hates her own child as a reminder of her hopeless situation and adores the young child of the white family she works for. Morrison clearly condemns a racist culture for its worship of white standards of beauty and reacts against the damaging internalization of assumptions of immutable inferiority originating in the outside gaze, projected onto popular images. Inversion or reversal is again apparent in Morrison's division of the book into 4 larger units: fall, spring, winter, and summer. The implication of cyclic seasonal structure is that the events in the story are likely to be repeated, but as mark Lemaitre comments in this novel, autumn is not a season with leaves of beautiful colors as one might expect, but rather a season of a child's sickness, cuffed up on her bed, and the colors of autumn are used to describe her, that is, Claudia's vomit. Furthermore, he argues that the child's winter should be playful and the primary emotion should be anticipation. There is no anticipation in the life of the victim. Spring echoes autumn and winter with references to death. Lavater regards similar occurrences of unexpected disruptions in the text as a violation of the text by itself. To the contrary, I am contending that it is primarily a deliberate violation of the generic traditions by the author. Intertextual references to the genre of the memorial are also undermined by references to a children's fairy tale, The Ugly Duckling, though this duckling will never turn into a beautiful swan. The Bluest Eye begins with a replication of the Dick and Jane readers that were one of the primary instruments used to teach generations of American children how to read. By reproducing the primers at the beginning of the novel, the Bluest Eye questions the story told in the primers of the lives of the fictional Dick and Jane and their family. This narrative of family life is artificial and flat, yet in its use as such a central tool in teaching millions of children to read, the narrative becomes a powerful sign of what is normal and desirable, a story that inevitably impresses itself upon the child who is in the process of acquiring literacy. In The Bluest Eye, the Dick and Jane narrative represents an accepted, almost invisible controlling narrative against which each of the primary characters unconsciously evaluates her own existence. The story becomes a litmus test against which the characters measure their self-worth. Both of these primary characters, Claudia McTeer and Pecola Breedlove, move through the 4 seasons of the novel, autumn, winter, spring, and summer, in search of validation of their lives. Since the earliest critical responses, various commentators have pointed out to the relevance of the opening Dick and Jane excerpt to both the structure and ideology of the novel. Michael Awkward claims that by taking the primer as an intertext or a pretext, the author revives and at once subverts the conventions of the authenticating document, usually written by whites to confirm genuine black authorship of the subsequent text. Morrison signifies on the white hegemonic discourses that has nothing to do with the realities of black life and refuses to accept the definitions of the African American experience according to the white standards. Ironically, the textbook is designed to force the reader to see the world through rose-colored or rather white glasses. But the introduction into literacy is based on a text that is meaningless from the perspective of African American children. The inculcation of blackness as a negative signifier in the minds of the black community causes the destruction and madness of Pecola. The 7 central elements of Jane's world, house, family, cat, mother, father, dog, and friend, are used to organize the chapters and become in turn plot elements, but only after they are inverted to fit the realities of Pecola's world. As a result, The Bluest Eye is centered upon the home and the danger of being put outdoors. The threefold repetition of the pretext, a descent into chaos, shows the lack of meaning of the text for poor black children. The text without spaces challenges the reader to make sense of a senseless world and calls for compassion. Immediately thereafter, the childlike voice cedes to the bittersweet memories of an adult Claudia, looking back upon the past that we are about to encounter. As a child, she and her friend, sister Freda, naively felt guilty about the sad events of the fall of 1941. The baby and Piccola's father, Chloe, are dead at the time of Claudia's present. There is a metaphorical parallel drawn between the seeds of marigold that she and her sister failed to plant deep enough to take root and the seeds of Piccola's father that he scattered in the wrong ground. The metaphor extends to Piccola herself, who was born in a hostile world, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Claudia's storytelling is oral, introduced by a phrase often overheard in women's intimate gossip, quiet as it's kept, which suggests that it is a story to be told and withheld at the same time, a story of incest, of blame, of loss. Claudine Renaud describes The Bluest Eye as an anti-Builder's roman, for it is about the gradual descent into schizophrenia of the young black protagonist. Jacqueline de Wever, a scholar of the myth criticism, has searched for analogies and contrasts between Greek Demeter myth and the novel. She claims that Morrison's version is based again on the narrative technique of reversal. As Trudeau Maria notes, the effect of the folkloristic technique is that the outcomes consistently fall short of readerly expectations. In the myth, Ferosman plays with her friends in a field of irises, violets, and hyacinths. The landscape Piccola sees every day on her way to school is the urban desert of weeds, dandelions, and tires. Ferocian has a loving mother in Demeter. Piccola is slapped by Pauline Breedlove when she accidentally upsets the blueberry cobbler. Demeter does not allow the earth to bloom until her daughter is restored to her. Pauline remains dry-eyed when her daughter goes mad. While Perossus is returned to Demeter, a devastated Piccola is lingering between Coke bottle and milkweed among all the waste and beauty of the world, which is what she herself was. The myth of Fimola and Prisone, favored by contemporary feminist writers, is also inverted in the book. Piccola has no loving sister like Fimola, and her brother may already have run away from home. While in the original myth, Procene takes the horrible revenge on Thereseus for the rape of her sister, Pauline is helpless against Chloe and refuses to believe Piccola when she tries to tell her about her father's abuse. Rather unexpectedly, Piccola's rape is related through the eyes of the abuser. Without turning away from the pain and consequences for the victimized child, Morrison challenges us to understand the attacker. Chloe despises Piccola for loving him in spite of his painful failure, and in drunken stupor, in an attempt to give the love to his ugly daughter that she has never experienced, he tenderly rapes her. Such dysfunctionality takes an inevitable toll on the life of 11-year-old Piccola. Save for the martyrs, everyone she meets, including the members of her family, is convinced of her worthlessness. Her lack of self-esteem is generated by her alleged ugliness and also by the neglect, abuse, and contempt heaped upon her. She is abused by her own mother and father, denied or made invisible by other adults, but is also the target of ridicule from other children who constantly pick on her. Ironically, the only semblance of love she experiences comes from the three prostitutes. As a result, she believes that all this would change if only she acquired blue eyes. At the novel's end, she has been raped by her father, lost the baby she was carrying, been driven into madness, but continues her quest for the bluest eye, conversing with her imaginary friend, her double. Ironically, having been denied a sense of self and a voice to articulate her pain, in the end, an insane Piccola has found not one but two voices. Against this pervasive plague of self-hatred, also apparent in Gradalene, Soaphead Church, and even the family of the high yellow Maureen Peel, Morrison sets Claudia, the young but self-confident narrator, who voices an alternative to the dominant materialistic discourse. The complexity of narration is provided by the switch of the narrative point of view from first to third person and the presence of multiple perspectives. While much of the storytelling comes from Claudia as a 9-year-old child, she also reflects on the events as an adult. At the same time, Peccola's mother is given voice and Morrison herself intervenes as an all-knowing narrator. Chloe remains mute, though his story is related by the third-person narrator, whereas Peccola is silenced until the end of the novel because of Morrison's decision to show her as a victim of trauma who would be unable or unwilling to tell her story of her rape. According to Awkward, Peccola's ultimate finding of not one but two voices corresponds to the two-voiced narration of the Bluest Eye. As he demonstrates, Claudia narrates the first chapter in each section of the novel and relates matters about her own childhood experiences. The omniscient narrator controls the chapters that Claudia does not narrate, providing information about the histories of older characters as well, about incidents in Peccola's life of which Claudia could not have knowledge. But after the onset of Peccola's schizophrenic double-voicedness, the distinctive narrative voices of the Bluest Eye merge into a single voice. The adult Claudia possesses information of which earlier she was ignorant. In a revelatory moment, she realizes that the whole community was guilty of the internalization of self-hatred and the related scapegoating of Peccola. There is a shift from I to we and oscillation between R and my in the final part of Claudia's narrative, which generates ambiguity. She says, and I quote, "All of us felt so wholesome after we cleaned ourselves on her. We were so beautiful when we stood astride her ugliness. Her inarticulateness made us believe we were eloquent. Her poverty kept us generous." Quotes close. We learn that the formerly rebellious Claudia, as she herself admits, has adjusted without improvement. She has submitted to white middle-class norms demonstrated by the fact that with an undertone of egoism and possessiveness, she speaks about leaving a helpless Peccola behind in my town. Morrison's constant fascination with language is revealed by her presentation of the vernacular of black people in her novels. Black style is not, she warns us, as some writers think, dropping G's. It is rather the oral quality and restoration of the language of its original power. She likes to polish cliches and recover their original meanings. In The Bluest Eye, even the most distressing experiences is handled with delicate humor. Much of the comic relief derives from the way the little girls mimic adult women's talk, for example, mispronouncing incongruable as incongruable, and saying minestrone instead of mensurating. Yet Toni Craig Bambara found that her students could not appreciate the significance of the depiction of Peccola's first menses by Morrison because the onset of menstruation is not something that is valued in our mainstream culture. Observing that the initiation or rites of passage of the young girl is not one of the darlings of American literature. The taboo topic of menstruation, so bravely dealt with in The Bluest Eye, is certainly unlike anything I have ever read so far. Claudia's taking the lyrics of the blues her mother sings literally, and Peccola's innocent nagging of the three merry garigolds with questions is at once funny and heart-wrenching. The language used by children is definitely different from the speech of the adults in the book. In both cases, the author takes care to make the language rich but not ornate. Morrison's insistence on preserving the African American traditions can be seen, or rather heard, in specifying between Maginot Line and the other women. The borderline between decent women and man-hating prostitutes is erased, only the latter are capable of giving love to Peccola, whose quest for it elsewhere is futile. They notice her bare-legged poverty, yet tell her about Prince Louis instead of exposing her to the bleak reality of their lives. A comparison of Claudia's and the omniscient narrator's storytelling shows Morrison's deft manipulation of language, her awareness that for a child, the language needed to describe the traumatic effect of violence and abuse is not available. Thus, The Bluest Eye is an experimental text radically innovative in terms of theme and form. It contrasts the alternative responses of resistance and subjugation to sexist or racial oppression. Several commenters have remarked that apart from stunning imagery, the alternatively lyrical and dramatic depiction of violent acts, the hallmark of Morrison's fiction, is death watch. The characters, as willing or enforced spectators, often witness violent, either natural or unnatural deaths. The fact that invisibility serves as the grounds for the racism against blacks accounts for Morrison's preoccupation with violence in terms of spectacle, the inexorable white gaze. In consequence, Johnson is perhaps right. Sometimes Morrison runs, indeed course, the risk of transforming horror into pleasure, violence into beauty, mourning into nostalgia. Such is the haunting loveliness of this text. Thank you.